Bill Sempf is an application security architect. His breadth of experience includes business and technical analysis, software design, development, testing, server management and maintenance, and security. In 20 years of professional experience, he has participated in the creation of well over 200 applications for large and small companies, managed the software infrastructure of 2 internet service providers, coded complex software happily in every environment imaginable, tested the security of all natures of applications and APIs, and made mainframes talk to cell phones. I spoke to Bill back in early 2019 for a podcast episode. Bill joins again in this episode to talk about CodeMash, an annual developer conference in Northern Ohio. We talk about the Veilid application framework and Bill's experiences in teaching tech to kids over the years. We also discuss the latest trends in software languages and their relationships to application security. We hope you enjoy this conversation with Bill Sempf.
None of the top 50 university programs teach secure coding in their curriculum. At Security Journey, we help enterprises reduce vulnerabilities through application security education for developers and everyone in the SDLC. With over 400 up-to-date lessons created by industry-leading security experts and a programmatic approach that creates security champions, our program has increased AppSec knowledge as much as 85%. Visit securityjourney.com to try our training today.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. This is Robert Hurlbut, and I'm an application security architect and threat modeling lead at Acquia. And I'm running solo today. Chris is not with me, but I do have our special guest with us, and that's Bill Sempf. Bill, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And, Bill, you and I did speak before, and if listeners and watchers are interested in going back in April of 2019.
Back in ancient history.
Ancient history, right? It seems like it. We did have a podcast where you and I spoke, and actually we spoke at one of our favorite conferences, CodeMash up in Ohio, and really enjoyed that opportunity to talk with you, and glad that it seems like it's taken too long, but we're finally here after the world has changed in the last number of years since 2019, right?
Yeah.
So again, welcome. And would like to just start off, I checked back and we didn't talk about your security origin story then. So I'd like to give you an opportunity to do that and tell us what's been going on since. But, what's your security origin story? How did you get started in this world of application security?
So I've been a developer for a very long time. My dad was a science teacher, and we had computers in the house from when you could have computers. I mean, he had earlier things, but the first one I remember was the Tier S80 that practically everybody of my very narrow generation had. Moved quickly into Apples and whatnot, but I showed a thing for programming early on, so I went and did some programming stuff. And all throughout, I kept making the right choices as far as like what to specialize in, it seemed like. I got into the BBS thing real early, and actually wrote a driver for an Apple Mac 2. I don't think it was a 2E that would support a onboard modem and an auxiliary modem, both, because we had 2 phone lines. And I didn't realize that was a big deal at the time, but apparently it kind of is. And then I was into the internet working thing. I was into the communications bit. So that led me to internet stuff, which led me into that was way pre-web, but eventually it did lead me into web-related things. And I helped OSU change their library system from Gopher to HTML back when, we still had to download a web server from CERN and compile it. So I've been in it real early. And so I leveraged that professionally. Once I graduated, I started to do some stuff. And One of the things I did was build web applications for people. I did a lot of that, as I'm sure many people that have a similar background as me did. One particular site that I had, so I did some bigger things too, but one particular partnership I had was with a fellow here in Grove City named Fred Bollinger, a good buddy of mine, older guy, AT&T long linesman who'd retired, and he had he did like networking for local businesses, dentist's office and lawyers and stuff like that. And he wanted to set up websites for them. And this is in 95, keep in mind. Nobody had websites, right? Nobody could, practically nobody even knew what we were talking about. But he had one of the early fixed lines to the internet and a server in the basement. And I wrote some sites for his customers. And we also had this one thing that we built, grovecity.com, which was our city site. Our city is called Grove City. And we had like a thing where alumni could plan their, start to plan their, whatever you call it, when you get back together. The sports teams could put in their schedule, stuff like that. And one Saturday afternoon, I got a phone call from him saying, hey, there's something wrong with the web server. The hard drive is completely full. And he wasn't just nobody. He knew his way around Windows real well. So I came over. Fortunately, I could just drive to his house, which isn't something you could do with your servers these days. As it turns out, the entire server was full of German porn because somebody had found a SQL injection flaw in grovecity.com and uploaded an FTP server and was using it as an FTP server. So at the time, massive machine was completely full of this junk. And it was also happened to be our name server too for the people that he was providing stuff to. So that was my first time first time I'd ever heard of SQL injection. I didn't even know that any of this was possible. So I started looking into it and I was hooked from there. So I continued when the software development side for a long time, but I was always the security guy on the dev team. And eventually, I got off a long, tiring project and went looking for something else to do. And vulnerability assessment was one of the options. And I went, okay, I'll give that a try. And then I was hooked. Wow. So I've been doing that ever since.
Very cool. I know you've done pen testing. I know you've also worked with OWASP and some other organizations just helping out with security and so forth.
Try to give back a little bit. Community's been awesome to me, so I try to be awesome back as often as I can. Excellent.
And so, we just talked about CodeMash. So CodeMash is a developer conference. It's typically happening at the beginning of the year. Usually, I think it's around the second week of January.
Yeah, around the second week of January. Done that way. So the idea behind CodeMash was that it would be a amalgamation of all the conferences that always take place along the coasts. For back in the day, okay. So for the youngsters listening, it used to be that conferences were very platform driven. There was a Java conference or a .NET conference or a Microsoft platform conference or everything was very, very boxed in. CodeMash was supposed to be, we're just going to take the best of all those conferences, put them in the middle of what normally is a flyover state, and get all the Great Lakes region people a place to go to meet. And did it in the middle of the January where there's no other conferences going on,
right?
On an indoor water park in January, so you can walk around wearing shorts and a t-shirt and flip flops, and when there's 3 foot of snow outside, and because of course it's in Cleveland, so lake effect snow, yay! And it was just supposed to draw together developers and. We were supposed to basically trade ideas. I mean, it was an open forum as much as anything else. I mean, normal speakers and stuff like that, but the LobbyCon is very much where it's at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been one of my favorite conferences. I have to say, I think the last time I was there was 2020. I've been wanting to go back since it's come back again. But I find that the last couple of times when the opening for speakers is a time when I'm traveling. And so unfortunately I've had to miss it during the summer. Is typically end of summer is when they're looking for speakers. But how was this most recent one? So we're talking, it's already a few weeks past, but how was this past one?
It's good. We, like many conferences, suffered from the lockdown blip. We had to cancel a year,
right?
Because, well, everything was closed in January of 2021. It would have been, and then 2022, it was real small.
Yeah.
And then 2023 was a normal one, and then this year's, of course, it came in, and it's probably about half the size it was before.
Okay.
As far as number of people, and that sounds bad, but really it's much easier to get around and stuff, and find people you're looking for. It was impossible. There used to be 3,000 attendees and 1,000 staff speakers and miscellaneous people.
Right.
And with it half that, you can actually find people and have those hallway conversations that are interesting and stuff, and go float the lazy river more easily and whatnot. Right.
Yeah, I've seen that similar for OWASP, for example. I remember a couple of years ago going in San Francisco, and it was much, much smaller, as you can imagine, in 2022. And then 2023, much larger in DC. But that's true. I think, this year, 2024, we're going to see more come back and more people. But, as it's smaller, sometimes you do have those more opportunities or better opportunities to be able to find people and talk to them that maybe you just missed when there was a much larger conference.
Yeah, absolutely. People got different hobbies and stuff too. So they have other, through the lockdown. So their interests may take them into a community other than their development community or their security community that they were sitting in before. And it's not like they don't want to go to conferences. It's just they met another group of people and they're kind of sharing. Right. That's kind of thing. That's something I've learned in Locksport, which is that when we obviously, that's a very touchy-feely hobby. When we all get together, trying to get everybody back together was kind of hard because everyone had gotten into something else over the lockdown. Right. So now it's like sharing your hobby time with another partner, sort of.
Right. So at this last CodeMash, I want to go over a couple of talks that you gave. Sure. One of them was on an application framework. It looks like it was introduced at DEF CON 31.
Yep, Veilid.
Veilid, yeah. So tell me about that, and our listeners. Why should developers learn and use that framework? What is it, and
sure,
why? How could they use it?
So Veilid is a application network framework that's mobile first of all, and it's privacy driven. So all of the communication that is taking place, where each of the organizations that get the pass through of the traffic are collecting that data for future modeling of the kind of people who use that service that they're clicking on or whatever. That's getting a little tiring for a lot of people, where you literally don't know, like if you happen to send your location data to server X, how many places between here and there are collecting that data and using it, even if it's not directly associated with your name. Mm-hmm. The collection and monetization of the data that we're moving around is getting very frustrating. And there's been a couple of tries to solve that problem with overlays and building from the ground up. Veilid's kind of in the middle. They take the existing internet protocols and they're providing a collection of APIs that a developer can use to do their normal network traffic, but it moves the data from point A to point B very much in a Tor-like way, where it's tossing around amongst other nodes in the network. And it's brilliantly designed and extraordinarily well developed as well by the Cult of the Dead Cow, one of the original hacking groups that was with Loft Industries and everything else back in the 90s. CDC wrote back office. If anybody was a Windows admin in 2000 timeframe,
Right.
you know how people got into your Outlook or your Exchange install, or your SharePoint install, or even Word and Office products. That
Right.
was how you broke in. But this is much more driven for not attack side stuff. This is defense side stuff. We're defending ourselves against
Right.
this massive superstructure that's being built, where that's basically trading in our data constantly. It's some pretty interesting stuff. It really is.
Okay.
It's a neat early open source project that really does need some help from developers, and it's early enough you can get in and actually make a difference.
Okay. Is it out on GitHub or
It's
somewhere
GitLab,
else?
actually.
GitLab. Okay.
Yeah, which I found very interesting. I have a number of my customers use GitLab, and it's nice because you can reach out and touch someone at GitLab. GitHub's kind of a walled garden as far as the people are concerned, and
Right.
getting like, hey, how do you do this, that kind of thing. Whereas GitLab is much a little bit younger and more flexible that way. So it's nice to be able to just, like, the forums, the developers hang out on the forums and stuff, and you don't run into that as much with GitLab.
Right.
With
Okay.
GitHub, I mean.
Right. Okay. We'll encourage folks to take a look at it.
Yeah.
The other topic, and we actually touched on this in the last podcast, but I want to kind of get an idea, where are we now? But I know that working with Kidsmash and other endeavors, but your topic was developing kids in tech, a retrospective. So tell us about that and
Sure.
some of the experiences there.
Yeah, I basically what I did is I kind of, as kind of a joking way of looking at it, I took the model of development of a child into a tech savvy, but philosophically sound adult, taking them down that path using the agile method. So that very circular pattern, following the principles of the Agile Manifesto. And since I'm pretty much done with that process with my own kids, it's like, that's why this is the retrospective. I mean,
Okay.
my kids are 18 and 13. They teach me about tech stuff all the time. Anytime I have to use Discord, I go to one of them and they're like, how do you do this? So it went fairly well, but I more or less walked through what I used in not only with these two, but also with Scouts, working with Scouts for years and years, and working with Kidsmash, and just being the advice giver in the family for people who, have kids that they're not necessarily technically savvy, but they want to make sure their kids are, and what should the goal be. And that's pretty much what the talk was about, was what path do you take? And I'm not talking about making the next great programmer or network engineer or anything like that, or hacker for that matter. I'm just talking about creating tech savvy kids. So we talked about starting, at a very young age, with the couple of things you need to be a good technical user. You need, you need creativity, you need observation, and you need problem solving skills. And no matter whether you're going to do anything with a computer, even except for just like randomly surf web pages, you're going to need those three characteristics. So we talked about starting out with like art supplies and how to solve problems by building things, and then getting into more advanced art supplies like 3D printers and stuff, and see that takes a path all to itself. And we talked about following a kid's actual interests. I talked about weather. I've got this little thing called the Atmo tube that collects all kinds of weather data and allows you to access it and to get parts of it into a data munging tool set that you can then play with. We talked about network stuff like the Flipper Zero, which it's really funny because at this year's CodeMash, somebody had one. For those of you who aren't familiar with Flipper Zero, it's basically a signals testing kit in one box. If you've ever done any network security testing or physical penetration testing, you've probably got that box of miscellaneous things like a Bluetooth antenna that's got an open firmware piece, and it's easy, you can hack on it, and a Wi-Fi pineapple and all this stuff.
Right.
Pretty much all that stuff is built into this little box here with some existing code in it. But there's somebody relatively soon before CodeMash released a Bluetooth spamming thing that will basically take an iPhone offline if you run it. I mean, you could go into a room with a bunch of iPhones and start it, and all the iPhones will stop working because they'll be getting spammed with Bluetooth. It's a known flaw in iOS, but nobody was really doing anything with it until somebody wrote a tool for this to make it happen. So it was funny that we had that with me, and we had a couple of the security attendees who were running tracking packages to look for people with flippers, to try to figure out who had the Bluetooth thing running. They might not even know it was running on their flipper, because that's the way those things are. And so every time I walk past one, they'd be like, we already know you have a flipper. Yes, I need one for my talk. I'm going to show it. Anyway, we talked about video gaming and getting started early, building things with Roblox and Minecraft. And I've got I made a big list of all the stuff that I have used through the years and have used recently. Put it up on a gist. I'll get it to you guys later, and you can put it in the show notes afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Great, fantastic. Yeah, thank you. So, just sort of rounding out about conferences, in particular developer conferences. This is a question that came up when I was at ThreatModCon. When I was given the keynote, we had at the end, we had actually a question and answer time. And one of the questions was, for threat modeling, but in general, just application security, should we have more presence at developer conferences? Should AppSec people go there and speak? What about developers who are interested in security and speaking about security? What are your thoughts on that? And what are some things that they could talk about and that would be helpful as well?
Yeah, the interesting piece to this is that a lot of people who historically have been in application security were primarily a security person who just ended up in an application role. I mean, very often it's somebody who came up the normal way. He started at a help desk somewhere, had a proclivity for dealing with security related issues, ended up somewhere jockeying some logs, and then just wound their way up through the cycle. And eventually, by accident, kind of ended up in application security. Of course, they're absolutely wonderful. Some of the best AppSec people I know come exactly from that background. But having developers in that role, like myself, it provides just a different voice, a different perspective to both the community and also to the corporations and organizations that are in need of protection and education as far as application security is concerned. I think that, people who are in application security with a primarily network background should go to developer conferences and see what the developers are dealing with. And people who are in development should absolutely be going to security conferences and seeing what the attackers are doing, because they often don't know. Even people who are security savvy, a lot of times cross-site scripting means that you can bring up a dialog box in a web form, because that's all they've ever seen done with cross-site scripting. But going to, a B-side somewhere and having somebody show some, new exploits that have been discovered because of cross-site scripting flaws in applications and channeling things and stacking them on top of each other, is real beneficial. So I'm a big believer in broadening your knowledge base. And it's because I'm very much a jack of all trades, master of none kind of person personally. But I do think that there should be a lot of inner traffic. And I love the conferences that I've seen it a lot more on the development side, development conferences creating a security track for people to come and give those kind of talks. I remember I'm working on doing the speaker selection for a conference here in town called Stir Trek. It's held at a movie theater every year in May. So you get to give your talk on a movie screen, literally. And then at the end, we all get together and watch whatever the big summer blockbuster is. I can't remember what we're doing this year, but Phil Grimes, it goes by Grape Ape Online. It came in and gave a full scale demo of cross-site request forgery and it worked. I mean, an actual live demo, and it worked. It opened some eyes. Because, of course, what's cross-site request forgery to a developer? It's an item in a report that says, hey, you're missing this token. And they go, oh, okay. And they get to put the token in there, but they don't know what it means.
Right.
But now those people know because they went to Phil's talk.
And saw it.
They saw it happen.
Right.
And that's why I locked it. When I go to developer groups or conferences and give trainings, I like to kind of the last section of it. I like to get into some advanced payloads and what really the kind of damage that can be done, if you are willing to put a little bit of time into coding something that does what you want it to do, you can do some damage even with real straightforward flaws in software development. So I think it's an important addition to the overall community.
Excellent. So just rounding out, talking about developing and being a programmer. Of course, that's my background as well. We both focused on .NET for many years, of course. Yeah. But what are some of the trends, or what are your thoughts on the trends in new languages and related to AppSec?
Well, it's funny. We're circling back real quick to Veilid. Veilid's written in Rust.
Okay. I was curious about that as well.
I am not a Rust developer at all, but they did it for a lot of reasons. It is very much runs along the secure by default kind of philosophy. There are no scissors to run with in Rust. It's not that they don't give you the scissors. There are no scissors.
There are no scissors, right?
There's no scissors. So you have all the power until you get to that line, and then the language just says nothing. I mean, it doesn't give you anything. There's nothing like some magic thing you can wiggle to make it so you can do this thing you want to do that you probably shouldn't do. Rust just simply doesn't have those pieces built into it. But there's been a lot of malware written in Rust recently, a tremendous amount, actually. Rust and Golang both. And somebody at the Veilid talk asked, I'm really interested to see that they built this thing in Rust. What else is Rust good for? I'm like, well, writing malware, because it's true. It's an awesome language to write malware with, but it's not a be all end all, that's for sure. But yeah, my main thing actually isn't what I'm seeing most of myself in the work that I do. Isn't an issue of the new languages that are showing up. The fact is that not a lot of the kind of people who have their applications sitting on along the outer boundary of their organization where they need them to be pen tested, to have a vulnerability assessment completed. None of those people are building in Rust and Go or anything new, really.
Right.
But they are using a lot of new frameworks and tool sets. And those frameworks and tool sets are also using frameworks and tool sets that are using frameworks and tool sets. And the supply chain gets really deep. And it becomes extraordinarily, whoa, I just bumped my keyboard. Hope I didn't mess something up. Becomes extraordinarily difficult to keep an eye on an application from a static analysis perspective, especially like looking at you can't look at the code really anymore. I mean, back in the day when you and I got started and if you wanted to do something, you wrote the whole dang thing and it was in VB script and there was an ASP page on top of it. And that was it, in the Microsoft world. But now with the JavaScript frameworks, there's a billion of them. They're constantly being updated. They're using each other. And tracking down potential vulnerabilities is an exercise in futility in so many ways. They can't get there. When you can find things, half the time it doesn't matter because it's not anything you'd ever use or you're going to use. But the thing is, you could. So like in my position where I do vulnerability analysis and I write up all the things that could be wrong with an application, rather than spending the time to go and exploit it and show, look, I can take over your computer. I just say, listen, somebody who has the time to spend doing this can break into your computer with this. We know that. So if I'm looking at static analysis and I see that, they're running a version of some jQuery plugin that has a bunch of DOM cross-site scripting, do I write that up or no? Because it doesn't look like they're using it now, but they might be, and I just missed it, or they couldn't like tomorrow because everybody's on these super fast development and deployment cycles.
Right.
So I don't know. That's what I'm running into more than the changes in languages. Now on the mobile side of things, the slow grind of language change is a little bit more evident because it's a little earlier there. It's a little newer. So watching iOS go from Objective-C through Swift and through and now all the packages you can stack on top that, like the Telerik controls that allow you to build pretty easily in Visual Studio where you feel at home, and then you can just compile down to iOS or Android. That provides its own different little tweaks as far as vulnerabilities are concerned. And you run into that same problem where, we know there's a vulnerability in this library, but it doesn't look like you're using this library. But if you ever did, it would be a bad thing. So I don't envy developers for people starting projects for having to make those decisions up front. I kind of would be like, heck, whether we're just going to write it all from scratch, but you can't anymore. No, because you can't meet deadlines and keep up with everybody else if you do. So,
right.
No, that's kind of my take.
Different world, but certainly good things to keep track of and be aware of, supply chain issues, and of course all the pre-written code that we're using, and where are those, where are the dependencies and so forth. So
that's exactly right.
Great points. Well, Bill, one of the things that we typically do towards the end of our podcast interview is we have what we call this lightning round. And actually, I've been doing these, and so I'm going to ask the questions today as well. So 3 questions. First is what we call our controversial take. What's your most controversial opinion on application security, and why do you hold that view?
Web application firewalls are useless. They are trivial to bypass, and you simply cannot stop really bad problems with regular expressions, which is what they all use under the covers. They can say, oh, we've got this fancy sauce that we use to determine if a given request might be an attack. And no, it's eventually somewhere down in the pipeline, it's a regular expression. And you simply can't write one that will find either SQL injection or command injection of an operating system, or even cross-site scripting that won't prevent something. So quick story, that obviously this particular problem has been fixed, but when that SQL injection flaw that I mentioned way back at the beginning that got me started in all this, my first way of solving, quote unquote, the problem was to prevent people from putting tick marks in apostrophes, right? Took about an hour before we got an email from Mary O'Malley, who couldn't update her alumni stuff. And that's Okay, fast forward to that 30 years or so, that's what we're still dealing with today.
Right.
You go look at the rule, the very few tools that will let you actually see the rules they're using, and they're these big, huge,
Right.
1,000-character long regex, and they're useless. So there's my controversial opinion: is WAFs are useless. Don't bother. Just write your code securely to begin with.
Excellent. All right. Number two, what would it say if you could display a single message on a billboard at the RSA or Black Hat conference?
I'm tempted to say don't click shit, but that's not. I've actually been converted from that. I mean, I want to say something. I mean, probably something more philosophical, like check your premises, because the if people in the application security world, or security in general, would just step back and not concern themselves with the details of the upfront, the details of what they're trying to do, but try to get that forced view. So check the assumptions you have might be wrong. So check those. And the only way you can do that is by stepping. My other hand's way over here. You can't really see it, but it's stepping way back and saying, oh yeah, you're right. That isn't going to work on a global or application wide or corporate wide or network wide perspective. It fixes this one little problem I've got right here, but that's it. So that's something along those lines.
Okay. Excellent. All right. And the last one is, what's your top book recommendation and why do you find it valuable?
So I don't have a book. I have a category of books that I've been reading, and this may just completely be me. Okay. So, way back when I was in college, I, studied management information systems. Well, I studied music for a long time, actually. And then I studied management information systems. And I have I'm 1 credit hour short of a minor in economics. So economics has always been a hobby thing of mine. Before I was in college, when I was in high school, I was very interested in economic stuff and like that. So economics makes a lot of use of abstract algebra under the covers. And there are just a boatload of really good books written about real mathematics, not like, x plus 4 equals 6, but abstract algebra. And I'm reading a book right now called Math Without Numbers. It's a book about topology. And man, it has absolutely nothing to do with application security or economics, really, except for the fact that topology makes use of the same integrals that the economics does to make distinctions between models. But wow, it's really great to just stretch your brain around something else really technical occasionally and get around there. So I don't have a cool, a security book right now that I would recommend to people. But I would say pick some technical topic that gets you going. And if you have any interest at all in mathematics, even if you want to be interested in cryptography, studying real math, not arithmetic, but real math is, even if you just read popular books about it rather than actually take a class in it or really study it, boy, it changes the way you think about things.
No, absolutely. Okay. Well, Bill, as we'll wrap up, give our listeners a key takeaway or call to action or both.
I mean, honestly, I'll be honest with you. I think things are going real good. And in the security space, a lot of people are doom and gloomers and, oh my gosh, everything's falling apart. We're all going to die. But I'm looking big picture at what attackers are having to do to really make things happen. And wow, we're making some serious strides in making it safe overall. Think how we're making an instantaneous global network and trying to secure it from people who would do bad things. I think we're doing a pretty good job of that, considering how big of a lift it is. So just keep going and don't let the naysayers get you down. We're doing okay.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks, Bill. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining today, and
thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. My pleasure as well.